Hello, my name is Drew Miller, and I'm going to be talking to you about various types of basses and their applications, along with the types of strings you can use with each and how they can be used. As I mentioned earlier, there are several types of basses. Primarily there are electric basses and acoustic basses, and so for now we're going to focus on electric basses. It's important to realize that electric basses are the most popular form of bass today in most genres of music, and that is, they can be attributed to many reasons. One of which is its playability. As you see from this picture, it's a fairly decently, it's a reasonably sized instrument. It's about the size of an electric guitar, which when compared to a stand-up bass, or also known as an acoustic bass, is substantially smaller. The string height is much lower. That's also known as the action, and the string length is shorter as well. And what this means is it's easier to play. So if you're in a situation where you need to play a technically challenging fast passage with clarity, bass guitar is the instrument of choice for you, because this can be much more difficult than an acoustic bass. Another reason for it being used so frequently is that because of its tone versatility. It can be put through, because it's an electric instrument, it can be put through any number of sound systems, such as you can put through any type of amp that you would like and adjust the frequency settings on that to bring out the high end of the spectrum or the low end of the spectrum. You can dial in whatever tone you really want. And in addition to that, you can change your volume to fit whatever ensemble situation you're in. Another attribute is that you can use pedals, or effects pedals to be more precise. And so that can mean that, like, if you're in a rock or metal band, you can use a distortion pedal, for example, which is really great to have, because it gives you more musical textures that you can choose from. Another aspect is that it has 4 to 6 strings, and this makes it a very versatile instrument in that you can adapt to technically demanding passages. So the typical 4-string bass guitar it goes from E, A, D, G, from lowest string to highest string. A 5-string bass adds on a low B string below the typically lowest E string. And a 6-string bass, in addition to having the low B string, adds a high C string, which comes after the G string, which is typically the highest string. What this means, well, it means 2 things. One is that you can play higher and lower notes than would normally be possible. But what its biggest attribute is that you can play more notes in one position than you would be able to normally without shifting. So this makes it ideal for any sort of fast, technically demanding passages. So you'll see metal bass players especially use 6-string basses a lot. And so another aspect of bass guitar that's important to think about is that there are certain techniques that will only be possible on the bass guitar. Such as slap bass and tapping. And tapping is a technique that's commonly used by guitarists, but you can adapt to bass guitar. Moving on to acoustic bass, as we mentioned before, it's a very, very large instrument. From this picture, this gives you an idea how big it is. Typically, the top of the strings would come up to your forehead when you're playing. So obviously, it's substantially bigger than a bass guitar. What that means is that the string height is much higher too, and the string length is much longer. So this means that you have to travel a much wider, longer distance to play notes than you would on a bass guitar, and it is much harder to push down the strings, which means that obviously it's harder to play. However, the stand-up bass, also known as the acoustic bass, has a very unique tone that can't be accomplished by any other instrument. People have been trying years to emulate the stand-up bass sound through bass guitars, and it just hasn't been done yet. It's impossible to emulate. But this tone is what makes it ideal for genres such as jazz, classical, or any other number of acoustic genres such as bluegrass or really any number of folk genres. And so another aspect of the stand-up bass that's unique is that it can have a pizzicato and arco when you're playing. Pizzicato means plucking, and that's the type of playing style you typically see jazz bass players use, or bluegrass players. And then arco means you're using a bow, which is what is primarily used in classical basic playing. And using a bow gives the bass a very unique tone. It can accomplish an almost cello-like tone, which that's actually becoming a more popular musical flavor, if you will, in today's music. So being able to play the bass and accomplish the role of the bass, and then play a cello-like tone also makes it a very versatile instrument, and which is something that really can't be accomplished by any other bass instrument. Moving on to string types, both acoustic bass and electric bass have different types of strings to choose from. The acoustic bass can really be divided into jazz strings and classical strings. Jazz strings are designed obviously for plucking or pizzicato, and so one of the more standard types of jazz strings are called spirochords, and they have a very growly tone. There's a lot of up or trebly and mid-range to their sound. So in addition to bringing out the low end of the notes and fulfilling the bass role in the ensemble, it also makes the notes much more punchy, which means that it's easier to hear what the bass is doing through the ensemble, which is important in jazz because there's typically only one bassist. So it makes you more of a soloist than just sort of a background in the ensemble. One of the downsides to spirochords is that because of the way they're made, it makes it very difficult for arco to be used. The rosin they use on a bow to make the strings play, rosin is hardened treace F, if you don't know that. It doesn't grip very well on those strings, so it makes it very difficult to play arco. However, classical strings, I have bel cantos here as an example, work very well with a bow, obviously, because that's the focus of classical music. And bel cantos in particular have a very warm tone. They, rather than being designed to cut through an ensemble, they're designed just to fulfill the role of the bass. And they also have a unique attribute, which they have a decent pizzicato sound too, but it's more round and bassy rather than punchy like a spirochord is. And this can be attributed to the role of the bass in a symphony or orchestra. And that's because in a symphony orchestra, there's really like 8 basses. And if you have 8 basses with strings like spirochords, it's going to sound like 8 basses are soloing all the time, which will just sound absurd. However, bel cantos allow a group of basses to blend together into really one bass entity, which is really the central goal of the bass section in an orchestra. So moving on to electric bass strings, however, there are 2 main types of strings, round wound and flat wound. Round wound strings, you can see in this picture here, is an example of one. And the way they're made is you wrap a wire around a central metal core. And the result is a very rough feeling string. And so although it's rough around your fingers, it cuts through the ensemble more because of the way it's constructed, because it brings out the mids and the highs more of each note, in addition to the low frequencies, obviously. But these round wound strings can be subdivided into different types based on the metals they're made out of. So steel wound strings, for example, tend to be extremely bright and cut through the ensemble very well. So steel strings are used a lot at metal basses because they're in such a loud genre that they need as much high as they can to cut through an ensemble, otherwise it'll just sound super muddy. It's also great for slat bass because that relies a lot on plucking the string, relies on the treble aspect of the string to punch through an ensemble. Another type of metal I list here is nickel wound, and nickel wounds have a darker sound to them, and this means that they're really much more versatile string. So it's harder to distinguish them as an ensemble. However, they are able to accomplish almost any role that you want them to. In addition to round wound strings, you can have flat wound strings. And flat wound strings are actually designed to emulate the sound of a stand-up bass. And if you look at them, they are similar in feel to a stand-up bass. So stand-up bass strings are smooth to the touch, and flat wounds are the same way. And so, although, as mentioned earlier, no instrument can really emulate the sound of a stand-up bass, the flat wound strings do allow the bass guitar to just emphasize the lowest frequencies. and has a very warm tone, similar to the qualities of an acoustic bass. So it makes it ideal for genres where you don't play a ton of notes very quickly, because you basically are just emphasizing the low notes as more, you're fulfilling more of a rhythmic role than a melodic role in the ensemble. So it makes it ideal for genres like reggae or blues. Those are the most typical examples of flat wound strings. So, although they differ in many ways, all these types of basses and strings aim to fulfill the same end goal, which is fulfilling the role of a bass in an ensemble. They just accomplish it in different ways. So it's important to realize when you're going to be playing an ensemble that whether you're going to be playing in a jazz setting or acoustic setting, in which case, acoustic bass is perfect, or if you'll be playing in a setting where it's a very loud band and you'll be playing rock music and it'll be primarily surrounded by electric guitars, drums, and vocals, in which case obviously you want an electric bass. And then from there you can subdivide even further by choosing string types that complement the style you're playing, whether it's going to be a slow tempo style like reggae, or it's going to be a very up-tempo style like metal. You really have a wide variety of options so that you accomplish any musical aspirations that you have. Thank you.